From the author of Spinsterella, A Strange and Unusual Romance, comes Spellbound, a darker shade of black. Get Spellbound this Halloween in paperback and ebook at online booksellers everywhere. Comic for Marvel Comics. Now, this was a comic series that came out just recently and was quickly canceled after a short period of time. And the writer was expressing his frustration about trying to market comics to African American customers. Now, when he was talking about in his video are things that I have experienced in my own career in trying to market books in the ISIS series and books like The Temptation of John Haynes. Whenever you try to market African American fantasy or comic books, you're going to run into something called cognitive distortion. And when it comes down to cognitive distortion, it's a belief that a lot of people have that the white man's ice is always colder. And in the fantasy and science fiction world, they always believe that the white man's characters are always better than black characters created by black creators. And this is an obstacle that many creators, including myself, have to try to overcome if we hope to market our products to readers. And one of the things he talked about that I found personally from my own experience is that a lot of African Americans, they are pretty much wedded to characters like your Black Panthers, your Black Lightnings, and many other characters, and won't try characters that are not associated with the mainstream. And he was creating a series that had a character, Nighthawk, who was pretty much part of the Marvel Universe, but not really interacting with it heavily as characters like your more popular black characters like your Black Panthers, your Storms, your Cyborgs, and many other black superheroes, participate in. And because those characters are associated with white characters, many black comic fans find them to be more acceptable than a black character who's created by a black creator and is in their own separate universe. For a lot of black people, they're not comfortable with that idea of dealing with a black character who is in their own separate universe, has their own adventures, and has next to no association with white people. Because I've run into this same cognitive distortion issue myself whenever I go out and promote books like the ISIS series or The Temptation of John Haynes or the E-Steam series. And the resistance you run into is quite discouraging in some cases, but you cannot let it get you down, and you cannot let it deter you. You have to persevere, because I've run into issues with primarily most of my resistance comes from African Americans, and they'll say things like, oh, this character is too light-skinned, like in the ISIS, or they'll say that this character is, not black enough. And what they mean by not black enough is that it is not black within the narrative of white people. It's not black because it's not coming in connection with white people, and they can't get brownie points with white people. And this is another big issue that black comic creators and black fantasy writers have to deal with. You have to deal with these Negro nerds who really, they like black stuff, but they like black stuff if it gets them brownie points with white people. And what they want is a black character that will find acceptance with white people. So they don't really want a black character who is black and is proud of being black and associates with other black people and works with black people. What they want is a black character who is black but has relationships with white people, because they identify with the whole concept of black as being in association with other white people. They don't want to deal with a black character who is black and being with other black people and working towards helping other black people. And this is a big issue that a lot of creators have to understand about this whole cognitive distortion, especially with a lot of these Negro nerds. The Negro nerd really wants acceptance from white people, and they are into comics as a way to try to get that connection with them. And yes, they may like these black characters, but they only like the black characters who are popular and have popular associations with other white characters. Once that character no longer has an association with other white characters, they don't want anything to do with it. And this is where they have issues with black creators who create black characters who pretty much have a connection with their own culture, their own history, and are pretty much, talking about being with other black people. They don't really like that idea. because when I would present concepts, like the ISIS series and the character of ISIS, I would run into this all the time. This is where these Negro nerds and these pro-blacks will come to you talking about where's the natural hair, where are the braids, where are the afros, and these are superficial things that do not relate to the content of the character that you're presenting or the content of the story you're presenting. What it relates to is that they want to have that black that white people find acceptable. They don't want to define black on their own terms. And a lot of black fantasy writers and black creators like myself, we want to define black for ourselves. We want to define our own concepts of black, and that goes over the heads of quite a few African Americans out here who only want to see black as it fits, again, through that white lens and through the view of white people. They don't want to see the concept of black as related to black people defining blackness. So their idea of fantasy, again, is an imaginary idea that will get them acceptance from white people. So that cognitive distortion is a major challenge to overcome. And what he said in his video about marketing to the youngsters, that's what you have to do. And that's what I do. I market towards younger buyers, and I also market nowadays outside of the African American community to larger communities. And I find what's really ironic about this whole situation with this whole cognitive distortion is these black nerds, these Negro nerds who say that they don't like your concepts, these white people who go out and read a book from my ISIS series like it more and are more accepting of it than the black people who I try to market to. Now, because I've had ISIS series books get more positive responses from white people in America and across in international areas than I did in the black community. And that really shows me, that there's nothing wrong with the concept, because people know that the ISIS character is black, they know that John Haynes is black, they know that Eastham is black, and they enjoy the stories based on the content of the story, the plot lines, the storylines. They enjoy it on that level. Unfortunately, many African Americans, when you try to market them with these type of material, they're not going to enjoy that story because they get caught up in things, superficial things like skin tone, and the superficial things, and the whole idea of a black person creating something, and think it's less than. But meanwhile, white audiences, non-black audiences have no problem accepting these concepts because they relate to the characters on a humanized level. And this is something why you have to, again, go outside of the black community when you're marketing black fantasy and black comics, because you can reach larger audiences. And this is what I've been doing over the past 4 or 5 years. I found this, through my own marketing and promotion, because I originally came into publishing to reach African Americans, and with African American fantasy, I found the hard way that the black audience is going to be the toughest audience to crack. Usually, it takes the white audience and the non-black audience embracing a character for the black audience to finally embrace it. And by the time they embrace it, it's sad that their cognitive distortion makes it where they only see it as having a value because it's associated with white people, not because a black person created it. And the black person created it because they cared a lot about the black community. When I create a character like an ISIS, I wanted to reconnect black people to the Egyptian mythology and then show them through this character African American history. And I also wanted to make these Adventures of the Goddess Next Door so that black girls could see themselves as a girl next door, as somebody who helps out in their community. And a lot of people don't want to see that part because they're so caught up in things like skin tone. When it comes down to black people, that cognitive distortion kicks in and they're looking for any reason to nitpick anything that you produce, because what they want to see, again, is that connection to white people. Because one of the funniest things that I saw when I produced the ISIS series was I did a little story called ISIS All About the Goddess, and that was one of the better selling stories because I think in some reasons because I put white characters in there, and it seems like all the people seem to flock to that one story, which pretty much proved my whole concept of cognitive distortion, because in the stories where ISIS is taking on black villain, a lot of people don't want to buy those, but the ones where I put her up against white people, it seems like black people want to buy that one faster than they would the ones where she's taking on a black villain. And again, people seem to flock to that one story, which pretty much proved my whole concept of cognitive distortion, because in the stories where Isis is taking on black villains, a lot of people don't want to buy those, but the ones where I put her up against white people, it seems like black people want to buy that one faster than they would the ones where she's taking on a black villain. And again, that goes back to the cognitive distortion. And this is something, again, that we have to take a long, hard look at, because when you're trying to market titles to African Americans and you're an African American creator, again, the cognitive distortion is going to be a major hurdle that you're going to have to overcome, but it can be overcome. But you have to really start focusing on marketing not just to black people, but you're going to have to start marketing to broader audiences. And this is why I take my fantasy and I try to take it to the largest audience possible these days, because I understand that the most resistance you're going to get is from the black audience, and especially from groups like your Negro nerds and your pro-blacks. They are the ones who say that they want these products the most, but when they get these products and they don't fit the narrative that they want to hear, what they're going to do is try to resist you and then tell you that your product isn't good enough, when really your product is good enough. Because when you look at the white and mainstream audiences that accept it, it pretty much tells you that there's nothing wrong with your product. It's just that the customers' minds are really messed up, and there's really nothing you can do about it except persevere and try to reach those who want to get to your product, who want to support your product, and want to be, the fans of your product. You can pick up Isis series books on Amazon.com by clicking the link in the description box. And you can also pick up Isis-related books such as The Temptation of John Haynes and the Eaststein series by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.